Hey, it's Vas here from Aussie RC Airspace and welcome to the very first episode of Hangar Rash. Today we are going to be upgrading the power system on my Flightline Hawker Sea Fury, and I'm going to be showing you what you need to do that whilst keeping the stock spinner and prop. Now before we get started, I do want to point out that I'm aware that Motion RC sell a power upgrade kit for these planes. You get a new motor, you change out your prop to a two-bladed prop, and you get a new spinner as well, and that's how you get more power or more speed out of these aircraft. However, for those of us outside of the US, it doesn't make it very much a good option because of shipping costs and dollar value and so forth. And also, if you're anything like me, I want to keep the four-bladed prop arrangement. I'm not a fan of the two-bladed prop on these warbirds. I mean, if you're going to convert this into some kind of pylon racer, sure, you know, put whatever prop you want to put on here. But I think for the scale appearance, I want to keep the four-bladed prop. And that's why I kind of did a little bit of research on what motor I could fit in here and what would actually work. And that's why I kind of did it on my Spitfire first before coming out and kind of doing it on this particular plane, because the power systems are the same, the props are the same, it's on a different airframe. That's really all it is. So for those of you that don't know, the power system that this comes with is a 60 amp ESC, and it's got one of these motors, which is a 580 kV motor. It's a 3748. And you know, overall, this is not a bad motor. It does have enough power for the plane to stay airborne, and it flies perfectly fine. It just doesn't have anything extra for you to have a bit of fun with it. And so I started doing a little bit of research and toying around with it at home, and I came to the conclusion that this is probably a much better option. This is an FMS motor. It's a 3948 760 kV. It's a nice beefy little motor, and has performed brilliantly in the Spitfire. So I think it's going to do just fine in this plane as well, because as I said, they all have the same power system and prop and everything. This is what it looks like next to the Flightline motor. So you can see here that they're very much the same size. Now, as you can see, the Flightline motor already has the FMS prop adapter on here. Because they are interchangeable between the two brands, I was able to put the Flightline prop adapter on the FMS motor, which allowed me to use the stock prop on the Spitfire. So the only thing that we need to change is the motor mount, because as you can see here, the holes for the motor mount here on the back are quite far apart, whilst on the FMS they're a little bit closer together. So we need to kind of replace the motor mount as well. And that's the one thing that we do need to modify a little bit. This is the motor mount that I've gone with. There's probably other options out there that might work just as well. But I decided to get the genuine FMS one that goes with these motors. And then once we change out the motor, we also need to change out the ESC. So stock ESC is a 60 amp. I'm going to go with an 80 amp now. You can probably go with the 100 amp if you've got something lying around. Just don't go any smaller, because you are going to be pulling more amps, because obviously we've got a higher KV, so there's a higher load, and we're still using the stock prop, which is I think one of the reasons why Motion RC switch over to a two-bladed prop, just to reduce the load a little bit, but increase RPMs just the same. But yeah, that's essentially all the bits that we're going to need. So let's get to it. Okay, so first things first, we need to remove the spinner. So there's a little Phillips head screw in there. You just undo that guy, and the spinner will come off, just like so. Now we need to remove this little bolt here. I just put, you know, a key or something across here and just give it a turn, and away it comes. Take that off and very gently pull this out. Look out for the washer, make sure you grab that. And that's it, prop is off. Now whilst I've got the motor secured here, I may as well remove the prop adapter. So this little drill makes light work of this sort of stuff, because it's kind of tedious. And there we go, that guy's off. Now the next thing is to remove the 4 screws that are holding the motor in place. So excuse me if my hands get in the way a little bit, but just got to undo these guys. Now be a little careful when you're removing the motor from here, because there is a washer that is down the bottom there. You can just see it on the bottom. It most of the time it sticks to the plane, but if it doesn't, it may actually fall out. Unplug your motor from your ESC, and that guy is out of there. Make sure you hold on to the screws, because we are going to need these screws again, so don't lose them. And we're not going to need this motor mount, so you can leave it on the motor, and that's it. That motor's out, and we can also remove the ESC out of there as well. Now, in order to remove the ESC, there are 4 screws holding down the battery tray, so 2 on that side and 2 just over here, just out of shot. You are going to need to remove those, and the whole battery tray will come out. So gently remove the battery tray out of here. And you'll see as well, this is how I added extra nose weight to this plane. I actually put some weights on the bottom here, and that's how I got a little bit of extra nose weight on there, because this plane does need quite a bit of nose weight. Now, with the tray removed, we can take out the ESC and unplug it from our receiver, just like so. And we can start working on a new ESC and putting the bullets on there and all the connectors and so forth. So there we go, my ESC is all done. Now, originally I thought I was going to need to put extension wires or something like that on this ESC, but turns out I don't need to. As you can see here, the bullets are lined up at that end, and with my connectors at the other end, it ends up being the same length, which is really good. It just means that the ESC is going to sit back a little bit underneath the battery tray, but aside from that, it's all pretty much the same. I did opt for 4mm bullets on the ESC, which of course means that I also have to change the bullets on the motor to 4mm, because it originally comes with 3.5mm. These ESCs, as you saw earlier, they don't come with any plugs, so you are going to need to get your own choice of connectors and of course your own choice of bullets at the other end. So now I can actually mount the ESC in its actual place, if I can get it to feed through the front there, and I can plug it into my receiver. But before we go and put the battery tray in, there are a couple of other steps that we need to take. Number one, we also need to mount the motor, and we need to check the rotation of what the motor, which way the motor is going, because once we put the tray in here, it's going to be really hard to swap any of those 2 bullets around. So let's do that first. All right, so my motor is ready to be mounted up. As you can see there, I've swapped out 2 4mm bullets, and I've also mounted up the prop adapter from the Flightline motor. Make sure you tighten those screws well in there and maybe put a little bit of Loctite, and you should be good to go. Now, mounting this guy to the actual plane, this is where the modification comes into play. And it's only a very slight mod, and it comes down to this actual motor mount itself. To be honest, when I ordered this, the picture actually showed one of the more traditional style of motor mounts that wasn't tapered like that. It was just straight arms. So I don't know if they've changed anything or if it's just the shape of the motor mount. But in any case, this is what I got. This is what I've worked with. And essentially the problem here is that the outer holes don't quite match the outer holes on the original sort of firewall that is on the plane. So all you need to do really is elongate, if I can get the motor mount to sit on there, all you need to do is elongate those holes, and you might be able to see how I've done this. I've basically just put a I think it was either 3 or 3.5mm bit, drilled it out and just put some pressure on the outward position, and that kind of stretches them out a little bit. Now, of course, you don't want to go too far because then you'll end up with almost nothing. So you do want to stretch them out a little bit, and then they'll mount up just fine. So this will actually go on the back of the motor now, and it will fit on the actual plane itself just fine. I've already tried it. There's no problem at all. It fits perfect. Now, when mounting the motor mount on the actual motor itself, just put a little tiny bit of Loctite in these holes, because you just don't know, and you don't want them backing out and then ending up with a loose motor midway through your 5th flight or something like that. Or it could even be sooner, or it could be later. But a little bit of Loctite on there helps quite a bit. So now I'm ready to finally connect the motor to the ESC. I'm gonna go like that and plug those guys in there like so. Now, before we actually mount the motor on there, because once it's mounted, it's really hard to reach in here and swap out any of the cables. We want to make sure, and there you go, look, my washer just fell down, so I'll need to stick that back up there. we want to make sure that this is actually spinning in the right direction. So it also gives us a chance to calibrate the ESC. Because we've now got a new ESC in there, we need to recalibrate it to the receiver. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I got my battery right here. I did this when I was doing the build for this plane, but in case you guys missed it, we're going to go ahead and do it again. We need to turn our radio on and make sure we are in the right model, which I am.
Timer cleared. Motor on. Flaps up. Low rate. Gear up.
Okay, it's going to go through all that sort of jargon. We've got to make sure that our throttle is active on the radio. So in this case here, my throttle is active. We're going to go full throttle on the radio. And once we plug it in, we're going to hear 2 beeps. Once we hear those 2 beeps, we're going to throttle back down to neutral, and that's it. The throttle's calibrated. So listen up. And that's it. We are done. So very simple. Now, I believe the motor needs to go anti-clockwise. So let's see what direction this guy is going. And as luck would have it, it's going the opposite way. So we actually need to swap out 2 of these, if I can get them out. Change that one to that one, and that one to that one. And we should be going the right way. There we are. Perfect. So now we're calibrated and we're spinning the right direction. Now I'm confident I can put the motor back in. Putting these screws back in here is actually one of the hardest things to do out of everything that you got to do to upgrade the power system, because if you just try to hold on to them on the screwdriver, the motor pulls them to the side of the motor because of the magnets. So you got to get in there with your fingers, which is really tricky. So I tend to just hold it like that with my index and then just get it in there like so. 3 out of the 4 are relatively easy. This one here has been tricky. Here we go, got it. So these 3 are the easiest ones, I find. And the 4th one is the one on this side. Mainly because there's bugger all room there. I don't know if you can actually see that on camera, but if I spin it around, you can probably tell there's a little bit more room on this side than there is on this side. And it's just a prick to get this last one in. Oh, got it, okay. That was lucky. And there we go. So just make sure they're all nice and tight. They are self-tapping screws, so you probably don't want to crank on them too hard in case you thread them. So just be mindful. You just want to make sure they're torqued and they are tight, but don't over crank on them because bad things might happen. All right, so that's pretty much done. Now we can go ahead and put our prop on. Putting the prop on is pretty easy. You just have to basically key that into the actual prop adapter. So just take note of how that's facing and yeah, just go for it. Pop it in there. Might need to give it a little jiggle if this one's being difficult. Have I not lined it up? Hang on, here we go. There we are, got it. First go. And then we can put our washer in and get that guy tightened up again, and then use my trusty hex key here and just crank on it a bit. Again, you probably don't need to like over tighten this, just torqued nicely and that'll stay on there. It's not going to go anywhere. Lastly is of course the spinner. So this guy, for those of you who also wanted to see how I balanced my spinner, because I didn't get a chance to show it in the build video, that's the epoxy putty right there. That's what that looks like, and that's how I balanced it. So, and it works perfect because it's not vibrating or shaking or doing anything crazy. It's worked really well. Tighten that up. Come on, buddy. Here you go. Again, don't over tighten this one. Just nice and taut, because you're only tightening on a bit of plastic there. it's gonna stay just fine. And that's it. Now all I need to do is basically sit my ESC flat on the base of the fuselage there, put my battery tray back on top, and we're pretty much good to go. Now the last thing to do is just to basically tidy up these cables and put the battery tray back into place. So I'm gonna go ahead and just zip tie these cables and just tidy them up a little bit, and then we can actually put the battery tray back in. Okay, so now that I got my wires all tidied up back here, all I need to do is basically just make sure the ESC stays down nice and flat in the fuse. Carefully slide the battery tray back into position. Just like so. I'm going to keep the cables coming out of the back like they were originally. Slide that in there just like that. And yeah, just screw it back down and we're done. Well, there you go. That brings us to the end of the first episode of RC Hangar Rash, and I'm hoping that this has helped out somebody out there. If you did get something out of this video, be sure to hit that like button before you go. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new. And as always, check out the video description down below. I'll have links in there and some part numbers and things for everything that I've used here for this modification. Stay tuned for more. I'm going to be taking this plane up again, and you're going to see the difference in performance compared to the maiden flight that I recently uploaded, and I'm sure you'll be pleasantly surprised with how well this thing performs with the 4S battery and just that motor upgrade. It definitely does perform really well on the Spitfire, and I have no doubt that it's going to do very well here on the Sea Fury as well. That's it from me. Thank you for watching. Happy flying, and I'll catch you all next time.